The year was 1962, and Ford was currently in development of a little project known as the T5, which was essentially Ford's attempts at building some sort of sports car. And right at the beginning, Mercury knew that they wanted in on it, but the answer was always a no from Ford. However, the T5 would continue to evolve and change from a two-seater mid-engine car to a four-seater front-engine car. Then in 1964, the T5, now known as the Mustang, was released to the public, and it sold like crazy. Following that sales success, this time when Mercury asked if they could have one, Ford said yes, and Mercury began development of their own version of the Mustang. But Mercury knew that if they were going to compete with the Mustang, they were going to need to do stuff that the Mustang never could, and they knew exactly what they needed. They started by adding 3 inches to the wheelbase, making more interior room for a 3-person back seat, instead of the Mustang's 2+2 design, and adding 7 inches to the overall length for extra cargo space. These minor changes might not sound like much, but it was just enough to make it slightly more comfortable than the Mustang, and meant that it could act as a middle child between the Mustang and the Thunderbird in Ford's lineup. Then in 1967, the Mercury Cougar was released to the public with great success, even winning the Motor Trend Car of the Year award. And with that success, Mercury started to have fun with the Cougar, making several different performance trims throughout the first generation, like the Cougar GT, XR7, Eliminator, and the Dan Gurney Special, which was Mercury's attempt to make an equivalent to the Shelby Mustang, although it was short-lived. But overall, throughout the first generation, the Cougar sold really well and earned itself a fan base. However, this was the peak of the Cougar, and the years that followed weren't the best for it or any car company. The gas crisis, emission laws, poor styling choices all but destroyed what the Cougar originally was. And despite some serious attempts by Mercury to revitalize the Cougar, it was discontinued in 2002. But the slow and painful death of the Cougar doesn't have to be the way we remember it, and instead, we can own a piece of the Cougar's glory days by buying a first-generation Cougar for ourselves. However, you're probably curious how much one of those cost in today's market, and that's exactly what we're going to be answering with this buyer's guide of the Mercury Cougar. You guys should know the drill by now. I hop on Facebook Marketplace, check out all the listings, and show you the price and condition trends that I see. Then we start with the cheapest and work our way up from there. So something very common when it comes to the Cougar is that you will find a lot of rollers, which is really unusual because when it comes to classic cars, even the cheapest ones will have some sort of engine, whether it's blown out of a different car or partially torn apart. And while you do find the occasional roller, it's not as common as it is when you're looking for a Cougar. So what's going on here? Well, my working theory is that since the drivetrain is shared with the Mustang, and Mustangs are the most common car to restore, over the years these had their engines pulled out and put into someone's Mustang project. And funny enough, the only person I know who owns a first generation Cougar originally bought it for the engine. And based on what I'm seeing here, that sort of thing is fairly common. Where I'm getting at here is that if you want to get yourself into a Cougar for as cheap as possible, buying a solid roller and putting an engine in it yourself might just be the best way to do it. Now, dropping in an engine yourself is a difficult thing to do, and many of you aren't going to want to mess around with that. So here are some running and driving examples. In my Monte Carlo video, I called cars in similar condition to this mid-condition, meaning that while they're not the prettiest thing to look at, there's still a lot of redeeming factors, like how all of these run and drive. And as for the price for them, it's kind of all over the place. Like on the cheaper side, you'll find that they'll need a paint job and cosmetic stuff in general. Then just stepping up the price a little bit, you'll find more original survivor cars. So there is some flexibility here, it just depends on what you're looking for and how much you're wanting to spend. So while the roller and mid-condition cars are a pretty good deal, the best deal is the restored ones. It seems that the Cougar does have a big enough fan base for there to be plenty of restored Cougars for sale, but finding a buyer willing to pay a high price for one appears to be fairly difficult. And that means that now the price of restored Cougars is extremely cheap considering what you're getting. I'll show you what I mean. You can see the prices for yourselves, but one thing that really stood out to me personally was the amount of detail that went into these cars. Like, these aren't your typical backyard restorations. Look at the door jambs, the interior, the engine bays, it's all top of the line craftsmanship. And the fact that you can get that for around $20,000 is mind-blowing. Now, some of you are probably doing the math in your head right now and have come to the conclusion that it's probably not the best time to start a Cougar restoration of your own. Because if your end goal is for it to look as good as one of these, you're going to be putting at least $20,000 in parts, not counting the labor. Which leads me to the conclusion. You see, right now, a Mercury Cougar is a really good deal, but it depends on what your plans are. For example, buying a solid roller and putting an engine in it yourself to build some sort of rat rod would be an extremely budget-friendly way to get a Cougar. But buying that same car to do a restoration on would not be a very smart decision considering the price the restored ones are selling for now. Something similar can be said about the mid-condition cars. Don't buy one if you want a restored one. Like, if you just want to do little stuff like a paint job or other little cosmetic fixes, that'd be fine budget-wise. Just don't buy one if you want to do a full restoration. But that's just my opinion, do what you want with it. I hope this video was helpful to some of you out there. If it was, be sure to hit that like button. It really helps us out in the algorithm. And if you want to see future buyer's guide videos, you can do that by subscribing. With that out of the way, you guys have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you next time.